Welcome to the NICKY OKOYE Podcast.com, and thank you very much for subscribing and downloading our most unique and most powerful material till date, The Entrepreneur Advisor by NICKY OKOYE. Entrepreneur Advisor is one of our series of exceptional, content-filled, empowering, and exhilarating podcasts, designed and produced for the 21st century entrepreneur and business executive wherever they may be on the globe. Dr. NICKY OKOYE, our anchor, is a serial entrepreneur, experienced business executive, and a 30-year veteran of building businesses and funding projects. He has also advised heads of states, presidents, and heads of global conglomerates on 3 different continents of the world, including North America, Europe, and Africa. His efforts at leading a venture from startup conception stage to billion-dollar status in less than 18 months is legendary. The Entrepreneur Advisor podcast series provides our listeners with extensive insight into the latest 21st century strategies for business development, investment capital aggregation, and global market penetration. In addition, NICKY OKOYE tackles the most pertinent issues while providing tactical insight as well as strategic solutions for building sustainable enterprises over the long term. Let's sit back and listen to Dr. Okoye. If you wish to engage Dr. NICKY directly, you can follow him at NICKY OKOYE on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Again, that's NICKY OKOYE on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook.
Welcome to episode 2 of the Entrepreneur Advisor. I am Dr. NICKY OKOYE, and I will be taking you through the strategies for the 21st century, some of the most interesting business models that you can adopt for your business if you're a budding or starting entrepreneur, and some of the most exciting business strategies for conglomerates, for executives of large companies looking to penetrate specific geographical locations of the world. I do a lot of focus on Africa because I have tremendous expertise and experience in that part of the world. But some of the areas that are exciting include South America, Asia, and some very exciting things even happening in Europe, to be honest. And so that's what the Entrepreneurship Advisor is all about. We're going to be taking you through these strategies, taking you through understanding some of the great business applications and models that we're beginning to see in the 21st century. And we will discuss how you can adapt some of those strategies and apply some of that learning to your own businesses. One thing I always tell my students and some of the executives that I coach and some of the companies that I support on an advisory capacity and a coaching capacity is, in order to build capacity, entrepreneurs, business executives, and their organizations need to have access to markets. We must identify markets first, then it can fit with our strategic plan for growth. Now, what I'm saying simply by that quote is that all business models, every single business model, is dependent exclusively on your access to market. By definition, a business requires a market where it can sell its goods or services. And so, as a businessman or woman, as an entrepreneur, my advice, especially to those I work with, is let's look at the market first. Let's look at where we will sell our goods and services. Let's identify that market and let's develop a penetration strategy and then work backwards to the ideal product or service, the ideal product service production location, and the ideal strategy that you would use to access that marketplace. That's very key. And that is one of the areas that we continue to use to support entrepreneurs, because a lot of folks overlook the market. And so a lot of young people, the 21st century is the century of the millennial generation. And you're always going to come up with all kinds of great ideas. Not every idea is a commercially viable business, because you must identify who your market is, who you're going to be selling the product to, and you have to understand how you get that product or service to market. So in other words, what I call market penetration. And then it has to be getting to that market in a cost-effective way. Most likely and most appropriately, it should be in a competitive price, at a competitive price, in order to ensure that the market can afford it. And that is the bottom line and the main crust for business strategy. And so as we're talking about some of the business strategies and business models that are coming on the 21st century, we're going to keep coming back to market penetration and how market penetration strategy affects global business, national businesses, regional business, even community businesses. Even community businesses need a market penetration strategy. No person can achieve anything of value or perform any work of significance or create any wealth of abundance if such a person works on a project, product, or service that he or she does not have a deep passion for. Dr. Nicky Okoye. That's a quote I have used consistently with a lot of students, a lot of my students, a lot of companies, a lot of executives that I have worked with. If you really want to produce something of value, you may be an entrepreneur, a businessman or woman. You may be an executive working your way up the ladder. If you want to produce something of value or perform any work of significance or create any wealth of abundance, you must be working on a product, a project, or a service that you have a deep passion for. So basically what I'm saying is that your passion will rule the service or the product for which you have engaged. Because once you have a passion for what you're doing, the chances of success have just gone through the roof. So what's so different in the 21st century? So before we look at the 21st century models that are beginning to unveil themselves, some of them being used by global companies, some of the names you know, some of them being used by small, medium companies that you've never heard of before. But some of these models have not even been used. Some of them are models that we have adopted in our own mastermind groups, in our own think tanks at the NICKY OKOYE organization. And so I'm going to continue to share them with you at the Entrepreneur Advisor podcast series, just so you know and get the kind of value that I want you to have in order to dominate this decade of the 21st century. We have just started a new decade, which is 2020, all the way to 2029. And my goal with the Entrepreneur Advisory series podcasts, as well as many of the other products and projects that I involve in, is to ensure that we create a new generation of entrepreneurs across the world that will dominate in goods and services and provide the best goods and services for the people of the world to take the world to a trajectory and a growth phase that has never been achieved before. We want to be part of that story, and we will be part of that story. And that is why we have dedicated ourselves to the NICKY OKOYE Podcast and the Entrepreneur Advisor series. This is season 2. So I asked the question, what's so different in the 21st century? Now, first of all, nations and nation states must recognize that entrepreneurship is the engine of most national economies. You go to a lot of countries and they believe, some countries still believe, that the government and the government spending and big government is what drives economies. And sometimes you hear economists making those arguments. But I think those are old arguments. They're very lame because that debate has been won. It is business that drives national economies. It is businesses that create jobs. The government's role is to create an environment conducive enough for entrepreneurs to come out and create jobs, entrepreneurs to make investments, for entrepreneurs to take risks. Most of the risks in any economy are taken by entrepreneurs, whether they are putting their own money on the line, their own time on the line, their own money at risk, or whether they're borrowing money from a bank, from a venture capital firm, from a private equity, from insurance, from any of the aggregated capital providers. They take money from them either as debt or equity, and they put it at risk. So in other words, capital being put at risk is being done almost exclusively by entrepreneurs. And so when entrepreneurs put capital at risk, what do? They create jobs. What does the jobs do? The jobs creates a tax base for the national economy. The job creates an economic activity, commercial activity. Those people who now have jobs go into the marketplace, they go into the economy, they buy shoes, they buy food, they buy clothes, they send their children to school. The economic cycle continues. And so, if you work your way backwards to where it all started, it all starts at the table of an entrepreneur, putting down an idea, putting together the capital, aggregating capital from his friends and family, or from her friends and family, from their bank, from their investors, and putting that capital at risk. And once they put it at risk, they hire people, they buy technology, they get a business premises, they buy cars, they engineer and they put the economy to work. So they become the engine room of the national economy. And so, my quote is that nation states must recognize that entrepreneurship is the engine of most national economies. And so, as we go into the 21st century, we're in the early stages of the 21st century, we must get leaders to recognize this. Secondly, technology is driving disruption in many industries and making it possible for small businesses, small-time entrepreneurs, start-up businesses with less teams to compete with large organizations and large teams of executives. Now, this is very interesting because what it means is that a young man or woman in a very small part of town, one part of the corner of Africa, maybe in a small suburb of Johannesburg, small suburb of Lagos, in Yaba in Lagos, or in a part of Enugu, or in a corner of Kano, with one or two people, can build technology, put it on a platform, take advantage of providers like Amazon Web Services that provides platforms for businesses all across the world. And you can compete with international businesses who have hundreds of thousands of teams working for them. Now, this is what technology is making available, making happen for entrepreneurs. It is a very disruptive aspect of the 21st century's business modeling. And all countries, all nations, all businesses must realize this, that you're not only competing with your aggregated large firms anymore, you're now competing with the small entrepreneurs if they have access to technology. Now, the third difference in the 21st century is that lifelong learning strategies are making entrepreneurship attractive to all ages of the population. Lifelong learning, which means let's break the myth or let's destroy the myth. The myth is that the typical entrepreneur is in his early 20s or late 30s, and that is when he or she gets funded. But the truth is that most of the successful entrepreneurs and most Silicon Valley venture capitalists have verified this information and have agreed with the information that most of the successful entrepreneurs that they have funded are actually entrepreneurs who started business in their early 50s all the way to 60. Now, the fact that the folks in their 50s and 60s are doing so well is because they have made their mistakes in life. They have come out of other careers. They have tremendous experience, sometimes 20 or 30 years of experience. And so the chances of them failing again are slim. Whereas the young people are starting out in life and they haven't made many mistakes, if at all they've made any. And so they're still going to make some mistakes. Some young entrepreneurs, go into 2-3 different ventures and fail before they finally succeed at their 4th or 5th venture. And so with the older folks, they've done that already, failed a few times with their money, and sometimes they have failed as part of an executive team. And so they're doing so well as people in their 2nd, 3rd, or 4th careers. So lifelong learning becomes very important, which means you start learning the skills of the 21st century, even in your 50s and 60s. You can learn technology, you can learn skills that will take you there. And for companies and nations to understand that the older folks are even more valuable than the younger folks. So don't discriminate about age when you are trying to hire partners or folks who would see your idea to fruition, who will make your idea work. There is no age discrimination in the 21st century. Everybody is valuable as far as the 21st century is concerned. And so the next thing we must look at are what is driving the individual. I'm just trying to create this framework and this background before I give you the strategies and the business models. Now, the ultimate goals of every individual and the driving force for every individual is people want to succeed. Why do they want to succeed? They want to be happy. They want to take on challenges. They want to be different. So innovation plays a big role. And many people are social beings. Human beings, by definition, are social beings. It started off back in the day of the caveman, the ancient world, where we were living in caves as individuals. And we realized very early that the individual aspect of one caveman, one cave, it wasn't a very good strategy, because you go hunting on your own and you get killed. You're taking on the game as an individual. It wasn't a very successful way to go. They learned very quickly that you needed to come together. There's power in numbers. And as societies, people started coming together. They started building communities and societies. One group could go out hunting, another group could focus on farming. And after a while, the human condition developed to the point where it wasn't always just about food anymore. So yes, some people would go hunting and some people would go farming, but there were other interests in life. And so some people started making the clothes, and then tailors developed, and some people started making the shoes, and some people started deciding that their job was to focus on entertainment, making people laugh, making people happy. Some people decided that they're going to tell stories, and so every evening when people came back, they gather in a circle and it's storytelling night, and that's how professions developed over the years, and it became more and more sophisticated as society continued to grow. Where we are now is that we know the ultimate goal of human beings is success, and that success ultimate goal eventually is happiness. And so how do we as individuals building businesses or participating in a business that we have a role to make sure that business succeeds, how do we bring value to the table, knowing fully well that we have specific undertones and specific goals that are at the back of our executive or entrepreneurship experience? There's 6 key winnings. There's 6 keys to winning. Now, you must have a clear vision regarding your business idea, your strategy for penetrating markets. I can never overemphasize that. Have a clear vision. Then you must have a solid strategy. And that strategy can be broken into different. There's business development strategy, there's corporate strategy, there's organizational strategy. There are all kinds of ways and means you can subdivide strategy. But overall, you must have a solid business model, which eventually, becomes your business strategy. And then number 3, you must have a competitive work path and a repetitive work path. So your work path must be repetitive and competitive, and everybody within your organization, even if it's just the 2 of you, or if you're 10,000, everybody must understand your work path and how to commit to it. And then number 4, adopt practical systems. Number 5, constant improvement. Whatever you're doing, you're making a product, you're offering a service, come back at the end of the month, ask your team, how can we improve? What can we improve? Commit to constant improvement. Then number 6, consistent execution. There is nothing as valuable as executing consistently. Every time I go to a restaurant and they feed me a specific meal, if I go there a week later, I want the meal to taste the same way it tasted when I was there last week. If you can execute, even at the level of a restaurant, consistently like this, you will continue to win repeat customers. I just used the restaurant example, but it applies to every business, especially in the manufacturing space. You want your products to continue to look the same and be the same. And that way, you can be sure that you will meet the goals and the keys to winning. Now, the 7 big challenges that are going to face us in the 21st century. 7. I'm going to just touch on the 7. I'm not going to go into the details because I want to share the business strategies with you before I round up. Number 1, we must have access to capital. So if we're going to be building global businesses or regional businesses, access to capital is key. 2, access to markets. So market penetration, I never overemphasize that. It's always very important. But in the 21st century, you're going to have number 3, which is access to technology. Every single business operating in 21st century must have a technology strategy. If you don't have one now, start working on one. You can't afford to be out of the technology game. Number 4, access to qualified personnel, people who have understood the value of personal development. If your team does not understand personal development, then you need to teach it to them. Or you need to go and hire a team that understands personal development. Personal development is consistent and constant. It doesn't end because the world continues to change. And so you must have qualified people, and you must have people that understand that they must keep the development process going. Access to affordable business premises. So you must have a business premises that is affordable. There's so many technology applications now that are offering, co-work spaces and virtual workspaces and so on and so forth. Take advantage of the 21st century. You must be able to build a sustainable structure. I talked about that before. Your structure must be sustainable because you don't want to be in business for just 1 year. You want to be in business consistently. And then you must have a conducive environment. Now, this plays to the area, the geographical area you choose. Not every area is conducive for business. This depends on the government in place. Sometimes we have very weird governments in Africa that don't make their environment conducive, and so they're chasing entrepreneurs away. So we mean we must have a conducive environment. If you don't have a conducive environment, then maybe you might want to look to relocate to an environment that is conducive. So in conclusion, I want to talk about the strategies. what I think is more important and most important for the 21st century, we need to look out for aggregation strategies. Look at a company called Airbnb. Airbnb is a hospitality company that doesn't own hotels. What did it do? It aggregated bed and breakfast, private homes all across the world that are offering their homes to business travelers or holiday makers. It put them together and developed a platform that would allow customers to access these breakfast homes or these beds and these rooms across the world. Now, I need to make you understand that bed and breakfast has been around for over 100 years. Airbnb did not originate the idea of people lending out their rooms for business travelers or holiday makers. That has always been there. I remember 20, 30 years ago when I was a student and I would go to London, I would stay in a bed and breakfast. And how do you find bed and breakfast in those days? You have to go to the local grocery store, look at their notice board, and then you see those who are letting out bed and breakfast in that particular area. Or sometimes it would come out, in the classified, in the newspapers. So what Airbnb did was just to aggregate all that in every single country, put it on a platform and make it available. And then once they did that, everybody else who was trying to offer their home for similar purposes was able to contact Airbnb, and then they built a viable business model. It's the same business model that Lyft and Uber are using in the taxi and the transportation industry. So business model aggregation is very powerful in the 21st century. So you need to look for other similar opportunities in other spaces. It doesn't have to be a global strategy like Airbnb or Uber. It could be community-based. It could be regional-based. It could be nationally based. It could have to do with your particular environment. I would like to hear from you at NICKY OKOYE for Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Please send me a direct message. Let me see what kind of strategies or what kind of business models that you are aggregating in your space that is similar to the Airbnb or the Uber model. And then I give you a big idea. Look at strategic business models for 21st century. Student loans. In the United States, we have about $1.5 trillion in outstanding student loans. These are the data from 2019. $1.5 trillion, which is being held by 44 million former students. Average student loan in the United States is $37,000. So you have 44 million students or former students. They're now working. They have average of $37,000 in loans, and the total loan is $1.5 trillion. I don't know about you, but I believe there's an opportunity here. Remember what entrepreneurship is all about: opportunity, solving a problem. I think we should look at this as a team and as a community, and then let's talk about it again, in similar podcasts or in future podcasts. Direct message me again what you think is the solution to the $1.5 trillion outstanding student loans in the United States. If we look at it globally, it's much larger, but I want to deal with the United States. Another challenge and strategic business model I think is waiting for us to tap into is student research. Millions and millions of students across the world, Africa, United States, Europe, prepare final year student projects every single year. What is happening to those student projects the moment you leave school? Some schools have aggregated them into certain portals. Many schools have not. What about a national portal? What about an international global portal? What can we do with student research? There's some very good ideas that are sitting on the proverbial shelf, virtual shelf, which means they're sitting in some file, in some server, in some back school, doing nothing, and that might be an idea that could change the world. And then community ventures. Community ventures are going to be the next big thing. Community ventures are ventures that are targeted to specific location and specific populations in the community. And then logistics. Logistics is huge. All the great things that are happening in e-commerce is all dependent on logistics. Walmart India recently acquired Ninja Cart, which was a company that was doing the specific big data and predictive analysis for farmers, linking farmers and suppliers to grocers. Now, Ninja Cart has over 1,200 warehouses and 200 collection centers. Say that, 1,200 warehouses and 200 collection centers. So, is Walmart going into the logistics business in India? And if they succeed in India, will they be going into logistics across the world? Is Walmart about to compete with Amazon? These are the strategic questions we must ask ourselves, and let's answer them in the next podcast. Let me have your details. Let me have what you think at nickyokoye.com. Thank you very much for listening to Entrepreneur Advisor.